They say the dead don't come back. They were wrong. 10 years ago, a girl of 17 was dragged out of the imperial palace in chains. No trial, no mercy, just a name, poisoner, carved into her record like a brand. Her father was executed at dawn. Her mother was dead within the month. And she was sent to the border wastelands. The place the empire used as a graveyard for people it wanted to forget. They forgot her. That was their mistake. Because while they were busy celebrating her destruction, she was learning. Surviving. Becoming something the imperial court had never seen before and would never be ready for. My name is Wei Liangyin. And I just came home. The capital city of Yanjing had not changed. The gates were still gold. The banners still red. The nobles still moved through the streets like they owned the air itself, stepping around commoners without looking down once. Wei Liangyin walked through those gates at dusk, wearing the rose-spun gray robe of a traveling herb merchant. Her hair was pinned simply. Her face was calm. Her eyes, those quiet, coal-black eyes, moved over every detail like she was reading a map only she could see. She carried one thing, a worn wooden medicine box, strapped to her back. Old, scratched. On the inside of the lid, in faded ink, were 3 characters. Her father's name. She touched it once. Then she walked into the city. No one recognized her. Why would they? The girl they had exiled was 17. Soft-faced, trusting. She had believed in loyalty, in friendship, in the idea that doing good work was enough to protect you. The woman who returned was none of those things. She had been trained for 3 years by an old rogue physician who lived alone in the wastelands, a disgraced man himself, brilliant and bitter, who saw in her something worth saving. He had taught her everything the imperial medical texts left out. The dangerous knowledge. The precise knowledge. How every plant that heals can also harm. How every poison has a counter. How the human body tells the truth even when the person inside it is lying. He died in her 4th year. She buried him and kept going. By the time she was 25, the warlords in the border regions called her the Jade Viper. Not because she was cruel. But because she was silent, precise, and once she decided something, it was already done. She never lost a patient she chose to save. She never failed to expose a lie she decided to uncover. And now she had decided to come home. The imperial palace was hiring herb servants. Low rank, invisible work. The kind of position no one with ambition would want. Wei Liangyin wanted it very much. She presented her falsified documents, a new name, a new origin, a history clean enough to pass a junior clerk's inspection. She was assigned to the Eastern Herb Garden, given a gray uniform 2 sizes too large, and told to report before sunrise every morning. She bowed. She thanked them. She walked to her quarters. And in the privacy of that small cold room, for the first time in 10 years, she let herself look toward the center of the palace, toward the towers where the powerful lived, and she allowed herself one single thought. I am here. I am already inside. None of you know it yet. Her first week passed quietly. She learned the rhythms of the palace. Who walked which corridors, which servants gossiped and which ones watched. Where the physicians met. Where the records were stored. She filed everything away with the same precision she applied to medicine. On the 8th day, she met the woman who had destroyed her life. Consort Ruan Mingzhu had aged beautifully. Of course she had. She had spent 10 years in luxury, sleeping on silk, eating delicacies prepared by a personal kitchen staff, draped in imperial favor and jade jewelry. She moved through the Eastern Garden with 4 attendants trailing her. Her laughter bright and practiced, her cruelty wrapped in such perfect grace that most people never even noticed it. Wei noticed. She noticed the way Ruan's eyes moved over servants without registering them as people. She noticed the particular smile Ruan wore when someone praised her. She noticed the small calculating pause before Ruan spoke to anyone she considered a threat. She had studied that face in her memory for 10 years. It had not changed underneath. Wei kept her head down. She picked herbs. She did not look up. Ruan walked past without a glance. Good, Wei thought. Stay blind a little longer. The first moment of satisfaction came quietly, as Wei preferred. One of the junior consorts, a vapid, sharp-tongued woman named Lady Fen, had knocked over Wei's herb basket in the corridor. On purpose. The contents scattered across the stone floor, and Lady Fen had looked down at her with the specific contempt that certain people reserve for those they consider beneath them. "Watch where you drag yourself, servant." Wei said nothing. She bowed. She knelt and gathered the herbs slowly, methodically, while Lady Fen's attendants giggled. As she gathered the last stem from near Lady Fen's feet, Wei glanced at the small cup of rose tea in Lady Fen's hand. The particular reddish tint of it. The smell. Steeped too long. With the wrong variety of rose petal. Common mistake. Harmless, mostly, unless you added it to a system already carrying too much internal heat, which Lady Fen's complexion, slightly flushed, slightly dry at the corners of the mouth, suggested very clearly. Wei said nothing. She finished gathering her herbs. She walked away. That evening, Lady Fen developed a spectacular rash across both cheeks and her forehead. Red. Blotchy. Impossible to cover. The Emperor was making his weekly inspection of the consorts the following morning. Lady Fen did not appear. She was confined to her quarters with a face like a boiled shrimp, screaming at her physician, who had absolutely no idea what had caused it. Wei, working quietly in the herb storage room, allowed herself the smallest smile. She hadn't done anything, not technically. She had simply not said anything. Which was different. This was not revenge. This was just the world correcting itself, slightly. She would save her real work for later. But something had caught her attention on that first week that she had not expected. Her father's case. When Wei Chenggen had been executed, his records were supposed to be burned. All of them. His patient files, his research notes, his personal journals, standard procedure for a condemned traitor. Erasure of existence. But Wei had a contact. A former colleague of her father's who had spent the last decade living carefully and quietly, a man named Physician Qin, now retired, who had agreed to meet her in a tea house outside the palace gates on her first day off. He was old now, nervous. He looked at her face for a long time before he spoke. "You look exactly like him," he finally said. "I know," she said. "The records. Were they burned?" He wrapped both hands around his teacup. "The order was given," he said slowly. "But the records were never retrieved. Someone in the palace archives lost them. Deliberately." Wei went very still. "Someone protected them. Someone has been protecting them for 10 years, Qin said. "I don't know who. I don't know why. But they are still there, Liangyin. In the restricted archive. Your father's complete files. Everything." She looked at him for a long moment. "Don't contact me again," she said quietly. "For your own safety." She left the money for the tea and walked back to the palace. "Someone inside the palace saved my father's records. Someone has been waiting. For what? For me." She did not know yet. But she intended to find out. 3 weeks into her posting, Wei had already mapped the entire eastern quarter of the palace. She knew which storage room connected to the records corridor. She knew which guard rotated off duty at the second night watch. She knew that the archive keeper, a small nervous man named Clerk Wen, took the same walk every evening to the garden pond to feed the fish, leaving his station empty for exactly 20 minutes. She was patient. She was precise. She waited. And on a quiet Tuesday evening, she was inside the restricted archive. Her father's files were exactly where Physician Qin had said. A sealed box, unremarkable, shoved behind 3 other boxes as if someone had very casually and deliberately made it hard to find without knowing it was there. She opened it. Her hands, for the first time in years, were not entirely steady. His handwriting. Her father had the most meticulous handwriting of any physician she had ever known. Small, even characters, lined up with the care of someone who believed that clarity was a form of respect for the reader. She had practiced her own writing trying to match his for years, as a child. She sat on the cold archive floor in the dark and read. The files were complete. Every patient he had ever treated in the imperial court. Every diagnosis. Every treatment record. And at the back, a series of notes that were not patient files. Personal observations. Written in a slightly different hand, faster, more urgent, the handwriting of someone recording things they were afraid of forgetting. The first entry was dated 4 months before his execution. "I have identified a compound in the consort's chambers that does not belong to any treatment I have prescribed. It is not in the imperial pharmacopoeia. I have seen this compound once before, in the private research of advisor Hu Zhengwei, 6 years ago, before he sealed his laboratory. Wei stopped breathing for a moment. Advisor Hu. She read on. I believe the compound is being used to suppress certain symptoms in the emperor's chronic illness, not to cure them, but to manage their appearance, making the illness seem to respond to treatment when it is in fact being maintained. If this is true, then someone has been deliberately prolonging the emperor's illness for years. The question is why, and who benefits from an emperor who is dependent on his physician's treatments. She turned the page. I confronted advisor Hu privately yesterday. He denied everything, but his expression, I have been reading faces for 30 years. He was not surprised to see me. He was calculating. I believe I have made myself a target. I will secure these records tomorrow. The next entry was the last one. There is no time. Something has happened to the consort's child. I am being summoned. Liangyin is in the palace today. She should not be here. I need to get her out before. It stopped there. Wei sat very still for a long time. Her father had not been killed because he was in the wrong place. He had been killed because he knew the truth. He had been about to expose something enormous. And so someone had used Ruan Mingzhu, vain, ambitious, willing Ruan Mingzhu, as the instrument of his destruction. Ruan had framed her and her father. But Ruan had not been working alone. She had been a tool. And the hand holding that tool had been advisor Hu Zhengwei, the most trusted man in the imperial court, the emperor's most beloved advisor, the man who had spent decades building his position on a foundation of sustained fraud and deliberate murder. Wei placed the files back exactly as she had found them. She sealed the box. She put it back behind the other boxes. Then she walked out, locked the archive, and stood in the corridor for a long moment in the dark. She had come home for Ruan. But the real target had been here all along, sitting in his silk robes, drinking fine wine, watching emperors grow sick and dependent and never, ever getting better. She adjusted her plan. The next morning, Wei requested a transfer to the main physician's hall. Her supervisor blinked at her. You're a herb servant, he said. I have medical knowledge, she said calmly. I've been treating minor ailments among the servant quarters quietly for the past 2 weeks. I don't want to overstep, but I believe I could be useful in a more direct capacity. I ask only for a chance to demonstrate. He was skeptical. She expected that. She had prepared for that. She handed him a written diagnosis she had made, without examining the patient directly, purely from observational notes she had gathered secondhand, of a minor noble's wife who had been confusing every physician in the palace for 6 weeks. He read it. His expression changed. How did you? May I try? She said. The treatment worked in 4 days. The patient sent a gift to the herb servant who had diagnosed her. Word moved through the palace the way word always moves, quietly at first, then all at once. The head imperial physician, a pompous man named Physician Shen Dao, heard the rumors and was not pleased. He summoned Wei to the physician's hall. She stood before him in her gray servant robe, hands folded, face completely neutral, while he looked her up and down with the expression of a man who had already decided what he was looking at. You are a herb servant, he said. Yes. You have been dispensing medical opinion without authorization. I helped one patient, without charging anything, without claiming a title. I did not think it was my place to watch someone suffer when I might be able to help. His eyes narrowed. He did not like her calm. Important men very rarely liked it when unimportant people were calm. The illness currently affecting noble consort Liang, he said suddenly. Testing her. Your opinion. She paused. Just long enough to make it look like she was being appropriately humble. Then she told him. She told him the diagnosis, the root cause, the treatment pathway, the expected recovery timeline, and the one common mistake most physicians would make that would delay recovery by 2 weeks. The silence in the room was very complete. You are a herb servant, he repeated. But there was something different in his voice now. Yes, she said. Physician Shen Dao publicly dismissed her from his hall. Made a show of it in front of his junior physicians, to reassert his authority. We do not take medical advice from servants. Remove her. Wei bowed. She left. 3 days later, noble consort Liang's condition worsened sharply, exactly as Wei had predicted it would. because physician Shen Dao had made the exact mistake she had warned about. The consort's family was furious. The physician was humiliated. The emperor, still suffering from his own chronic illness, asked quietly if there was anyone else who might help. A junior physician, one of the younger ones who had watched the exchange in the hall and remembered, suggested, very carefully, that there might be someone. Wei was summoned to treat the consort. She arrived in the same gray servant robe. She cured the consort in 5 days. Physician Shen Dao was removed from his position as head of the Eastern Medical Division. Wei was formally promoted to assistant palace physician. She accepted with a simple bow. No expression, no satisfaction visible on her face. Inside, she noted one thing. Step 1. Consort Ruan noticed the new physician. Of course she did. Ruan noticed every shift in power in the palace. It was how she had survived this long, that constant, careful reading of the political weather. She did not recognize Wei. 10 years and a deliberate change in posture, in manner, in the very way she inhabited space, the girl Ruan remembered had been eager, warm, expressive. This woman was none of those things. But something nagged at Ruan. Some instinct that a woman like her, a woman who had made dangerous choices and covered them with 30 layers of silk, could not quite silence. She decided to test the new physician. The invitation arrived courteously, as Ruan's traps always did. Consort Ruan requested the presence of the new assistant physician for a wellness consultation. A public one, in the reception hall of the Eastern Consort Wing, with a dozen attendants and 3 senior ladies in waiting present. The performance of a woman taking a polite interest in court health services. Wei arrived exactly on time. What Ruan had done, and Wei had suspected she would do something like this, was ingest a very mild stomach irritant that morning. Enough to produce faint symptoms. Enough to then accuse the physician of misdiagnosis or mistreatment in front of witnesses. A small trap. Elegant. Very Ruan. Wei sat across from her. She took Ruan's pulse in the traditional way, 3 fingers on the wrist, eyes slightly down. She noted the slight calculation in Ruan's gaze. The way Ruan had placed herself with witnesses on all sides. She took a long moment. As if concentrating. Then she set Ruan's wrist down gently. And she addressed the room. Consort Ruan's fundamental health is strong. I find no illness, no concerning symptoms, no cause for medical intervention. She paused. However, I notice an unusual compound in the pulse pattern. Mild. Consistent with voluntary ingestion of something irritating to the stomach lining. Not dangerous. But deliberate. The room went very quiet. Perhaps Consort Ruan can tell us what she consumed this morning that she did not consume yesterday. For the sake of completeness. Ruan's face did not move. But the silence around her became a different kind of silence. I must have been mistaken about feeling unwell, Ruan said smoothly. Of course, Wei said. I am glad you are in perfect health. She bowed and left. Behind her, she could feel the temperature of the room. The looks the ladies in waiting exchanged. The questions forming. When Ruan walked into the emperor's presence the following week, his greeting was measurably cooler. A seed of doubt. Precisely planted. Wei moved on. There was a night, in the 4th week, when she couldn't sleep. She had learned that her father's grave was outside the city walls, in the common burial ground where executed criminals were placed. No marker. Just a section of ground that the records noted as the location without any name on it. She went at the second night watch. Slipped out through a servant's gate she had noted was improperly latched, a detail she had filed away for exactly this kind of necessity. The burial ground was dark. She counted the sections from the record notes and walked to the right coordinates and stood there. She had brought 1 flower. White chrysanthemum, his favorite. She placed it on the ground. She stood for a long time without speaking. She had imagined this moment for 10 years, what she would say. She had constructed entire speeches in her mind during cold nights in the wastelands. Standing here, she couldn't find any of them. I found his notes, she finally said quietly. It's bigger than I thought. Advisor who? He's been poisoning the emperor for decades. Keeping him sick. Keeping him dependent. You figured it out and they killed you for it. She paused. I'm going to take it all apart. The whole thing. I'm going to put your name back in the right records. I'm going to make sure everyone who sits in that court understands what was done. I promise. She didn't cry. She had run out of tears somewhere in year 2 of the wastelands. What she had instead was something harder and quieter, a kind of grief that had turned to architecture inside her. Something that held the whole structure up. I'm sorry I was there that day, she said. I'm sorry I didn't understand what was happening fast enough to help you. She touched the ground once. Stood up. She was walking back toward the road when she noticed, in the shadows under a tree, a figure. Still, watching, she stopped. The figure stepped forward into the faint moonlight and she recognized the face. General Shen Mochen, commander of the Imperial Eastern Garrison. A man whose name she had found in her father's files, listed not as a patient but in a personal note, written with something that might have been gratitude. General Shen argued for a proper trial. They refused him. He is a man of principle in a court that punishes principles. He looked at her for a long moment. I saw you leave through the servants' gate, he said. I followed to ensure you were not doing anything that would be a problem. And am I, she said. He looked at the chrysanthemum on the ground. Something shifted in his face. No, he said quietly. You're not. They stood there for a moment, two people on opposite sides of a truth neither had fully spoken yet. You knew him, she said. Not a question. I knew of him. I believed he was innocent. He paused. I could never prove it. She studied his face. In 10 years of reading people, she had gotten very good at identifying the difference between a man performing honesty and a man who simply was honest. It was a small difference. She could see it. Good night, General, she said. She walked back to the palace. He stood there a moment longer, looking at the flower on the ground. ACT-3, the Jade Viper strikes. Tone, clear, powerful, building toward catharsis. The accusation came in the 6th week. Wei had known it was coming. Ruan had been maneuvering. The attack arrived through a noble family, the House of Bao, allies of Ruan, whose eldest son had collapsed after a banquet that Wei had attended in her capacity as the duty physician. The accusation was precise. The new palace physician had poisoned the noble son. A witness claimed to have seen her near his wine. The noble family demanded justice in front of the full court. Wei was summoned. She stood in the center of the court chamber, all the senior officials present, the advisor who among them, watching from his raised seat with an expression of polite concern, and she listened to the accusation read aloud. Then the presiding official put the question to her. Do you deny administering poison to noble Bao Liang? I do, she said. Then how do you explain his collapse? I would first ask what compound they believe was used, she said. Since no one has stated that yet. A pause. The official looked at the noble family's representative, who named a fast-acting stomach poison. Wei nodded slowly. That particular compound, she said, is detectable in the wine vessel it was added to for approximately 18 hours. If the cup was preserved, and I suggest it should have been, any physician can confirm whether it was in fact the wine. Another pause. More relevantly, she continued, that compound is tasteless in water but produces a faint bitterness in grape wine. Noble Bao Liang was well known for his sensitivity to flavors and has, on record with 3 previous physicians, refused grape wine on exactly that basis. He never drinks it. The room shifted. His collapse at the banquet, Wei said, was not from the wine. I examined him and noted that his collapse was entirely consistent with a rapid allergic reaction to a particular shellfish preparation served that evening, a preparation that his own family's kitchen has served twice before, producing milder reactions that were not recorded as significant. She turned to face the noble family representative directly. Noble Bao Liang's condition was caused by his family's own kitchen, serving a dish he cannot tolerate. The witness who claims to have seen me near the wine was, I assume without malice, mistaken about the identity of the gray-robed person she observed. There are 14 gray-robed physicians attendants in this palace. She paused. Then, with perfect calm, I am happy to assist the Bao family in managing Noble Liang's shellfish sensitivity going forward, if they would like. The silence in the court was the specific kind of silence that happens when a trap detonates entirely under the people who set it. Advisor whose expression had not changed. He was very good. But Wei caught it, just for a moment, a micro-expression that the face produces before the person inside has time to control it. He was recalculating. He knows I'm a threat now, she thought. He doesn't know who I am yet. But he knows. Good. Let him be afraid of something he can't name. She moved faster after that. There was less time now. She began treating a high noble's daughter, Lady Wang, 19 years old, who had been mysteriously ill for 8 months, declining slowly, losing weight and color while every physician in the palace reported finding nothing wrong. Wei found something wrong in the first examination. It was slow-acting, sophisticated, designed to look like a wasting illness, the kind of decline that would eventually be attributed to constitution or fate. She had seen the compound signature once before, in her father's notes. In the section about advisor whose private research. Lady Wang was being poisoned. Wei said nothing to anyone. She began treating Lady Wang, publicly, for what she described as a blood deficiency, a real condition, common enough, that made a plausible diagnosis while she worked on the real problem underneath. She kept detailed records of every treatment, every compound, every change in Lady Wang's presentation over time. She needed the evidence to be overwhelming. She needed it to be undeniable. She needed it to be the kind of proof that could not be argued away in a court where advisor who had spent decades building alliances. Lady Wang recovered steadily, and Wei's records documented, in precise clinical language, a poisoning that matched her father's notes exactly. She was almost ready. The voice becomes measured, almost quiet, then builds. She chose a day when the court was fully assembled. A routine presentation of physician reports to the emperor, standard quarterly proceeding, attended by all senior officials including advisor Hu, all senior consorts including Ruan, all senior physicians. Wei presented her case on Lady Wang last. She began with the clinical record. 8 months of symptoms, the pattern of decline, the compounds she had identified, the treatment she had used. She presented it in the careful, detailed way her father had taught her, the way that left no gaps and invited no misinterpretation. Then she said, the compound responsible for Lady Wang's condition is not in the imperial pharmacopoeia. It does not appear in any standard medical text. I have found documentation of it in only one place, in private research records I discovered during my time here. Records associated with this court. Records that document, also, the means by which the emperor's chronic illness has been managed for the past 20 years. The room had gone perfectly. Still, the management, she continued, was not treatment. The emperor's illness did not respond to treatment because the treatment was designed to maintain the illness, not cure it. The compound has been administered in small, regular doses, producing a chronic condition that required ongoing medical management, and specifically, required the ongoing presence of the physician providing that management. She looked up from her documents. Your Majesty's illness is real. But it was never necessary. It was designed. The emperor's face was a study in controlled shock. He was intelligent. He had always been intelligent. The horror of understanding something that had been hidden from you for 20 years moving across a face that was trying very hard to remain imperial. You have documentation of this, he said. I have the compound records, the treatment records showing deliberate maintenance rather than cure, my father's personal notes from the year he discovered this and was subsequently executed, and the complete clinical record of Lady Wang's poisoning, using the same compound, as an adult dose applied at lower concentrations to simulate natural illness. She reached into her document case. My father was Imperial Physician Wei Liangyin. He discovered this 20 years ago. He was killed for it. His records were sealed and hidden in the palace archive by someone who believed the truth should survive even if the man could not. She set the documents on the central table. I am Wei Liangyin, his daughter. I was exiled at 17 for a poisoning I did not commit, arranged by consort Ruan Mingzhu at the direction of advisor Hu Zhengwei, to prevent my father's findings from reaching this court. She removed the plain outer robe. Underneath, a physician's formal robe. Clean, precise. Her father's jade medicine pendant around her neck, the one piece of his she had been allowed to keep because they hadn't known what it meant. The court erupted. Advisor Hu was on his feet. Ruan had gone white. Several officials were shouting. The emperor raised one hand and the room went silent with the reflex of long habit. He looked at Wei for a long moment. Then he looked at advisor who began to speak, the prepared denial, smooth, authoritative, the voice of a man who had talked his way out of corners for decades. "Bring the archive records," the emperor said to his attendants. Quietly, like a man who had already made a decision. Who stopped talking. General Shen had positioned his men at the chamber exits 3 hours earlier. He had come to Wei the previous evening. She had told him enough, not everything, but enough for a man of principle to know where he needed to stand and when. When advisor who made his move toward the side corridor, 2 guards were already there. When Ruan's attendants attempted to leave with certain documents, they found the corridor sealed. General Shen stood at the main door and met advisor Hu's eyes without blinking. "The court is in session," he said simply. "No one leaves." The formal proceedings took 3 days. The archive records confirmed everything. The compound records confirmed everything. 2 junior physicians, offered immunity, confirmed they had been instructed to maintain the emperor's treatment protocol without questioning it, and had always wondered why certain symptoms never fully resolved. Advisor Hu was stripped of his titles, his properties, and his freedom. Ruan Mingzhu was placed under investigation. She had not known the full scope of what Hu was doing, she had been ambitious and willing, not a mastermind, and that distinction mattered, slightly, in the sentencing. She was stripped of her rank and confined. Wei's father's record was formally expunged. His name was restored. On the morning of the 3rd day, the emperor summoned Wei privately. He was older than he looked in formal settings. Tired, she thought. A man who had been sick for 20 years without knowing why, and now had to reckon with what that meant. "Your father served this court faithfully," he said. "He did," she agreed. "I cannot give back what was taken." He said it simply, without deflection. "No," she said. "You cannot." A pause. "His title is restored. His honor is restored. The formal record will reflect his service and the injustice done to him." "Thank you. I would offer you the position of head imperial physician," he said. "It was your father's position. It would be appropriate." Wei looked at him for a moment. "Your Majesty is very kind," she said. "I must decline." He raised an eyebrow. "My father gave his life in service to this court," she said. He was a man who believed in these walls, in this institution, in the idea that being good at your work was enough to keep you safe. He was wrong. These walls did not protect him. Doing good work did not protect him. She said it without bitterness. "Just as a fact, I have spent 10 years learning to practice medicine outside these walls. I am more useful there. And I am safer there. And the people I treat are people these walls have never reached." The emperor was quiet for a moment. "Is there anything I can give you?" She thought about it. "My father's medical texts," she said. "The ones confiscated when he was arrested. A formal letter of practice authority, so that I may work anywhere in the empire without being questioned. And a stone marker on his grave, with his name and his title." "Done," he said. "All 3. She bowed. She left. She found General Shen waiting in the outer courtyard. He had the specific quality of stillness that she had noticed in very few people, the kind that was not blankness but patience. The kind that meant something was going on underneath. "You're leaving," he said. "Today." He was quiet for a moment. "You came in through the servants' gate. Are you leaving that way too?" "Main gate," she said. "I think I've earned it." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Something more honest than a smile. "The wastelands," he said. "You spent 10 years there." "Yes. And you'll go back to the border regions. To practice medicine. There are villages out there with no physician for 3 days' travel in any direction. There were when I arrived. There still are." He nodded slowly. "I have garrison outposts along that route," he said carefully. "I rotate through them quarterly. For inspections." She looked at him. "Quarterly," she said. "Quarterly," he confirmed. She picked up her medicine box and settled it across her back. Her father's name on the inside of the lid. "The outpost at Shelling has a market on the 1st day of each month," she said. "The road passes through it." "I know Shelling," he said. "Good," she said. She walked toward the main gate. The capital fell away behind her. The gold gates. The red banners. The towers where powerful people maneuvered and plotted and used each other and occasionally, rarely, accidentally, got what they deserved. The road opened ahead. Flat at first, then climbing toward the north. Border country. Vast and cold and difficult. She had a name on her father's grave now. She had his honor restored. She had his texts on her back and his pendant at her throat. She had learned more in this palace in 6 weeks than she had expected to, and she had confirmed what she had always suspected. That the truth, if you document it precisely enough, if you are patient enough and careful enough and willing to wait for exactly the right moment, the truth is the most powerful thing in any room. More powerful than a title. More powerful than an imperial seal. More powerful than decades of carefully constructed lies. They had buried her like a seed. They had not thought about what seeds do. She walked north. And the Jade Viper was gone.